Greetings and welcome to Old Drunken Discography, where old friends and fans come together to BS, argue, occasionally agree, and discuss a musical artist. On the show, we go through an artist's studio album discography, discussing each album and then ranking them personally, highlighting any notable non-releases along the way. Today we are talking about The Who, the girl who loved Tom Gordon. Stephen King, I'm reaching here for my references. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm Jason. With me is Tim.
Hola.
And we have a new special guest because Colquitt is out for the unseeable future. You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Chaim, or Chaimster.
Chaimster. Okay.
As I go by, yeah. My online moniker in many cases. Good to be here.
We struggled to, we reached out to the Facebook group and we got us a Who expert, so.
I don't know about that. Watch out. I may get attacked for this one.
I don't know. I got some hot takes because I watched a couple other videos and mine don't line up with others. So, if you like this content, be sure to hit the thumbs up. It really helps the channel out. And consider subscribing to follow along with us. It's much appreciated. So, we're going to talk about The Who. This is a biggie here. I guess I'll introduce myself first, or my history with the band. This is another one. My dad grew up listening to them, playing all the vinyl. You know, Who's Next is a staple of my childhood. So is Tommy, Leeds. But I never really deep dived them until this video. So I've heard Tommy, Who's Next, Leads, Odds and Sods, you know, some of the singles, but everything else is pretty much new for me. What about you, Tim?
Okay. I mean, yeah, I've always been aware of them for as long as I can remember, but I really didn't start getting into them until my late teens, early 20s. I picked up a Greatest Hits. And, you know, it was cool. And then one day it hit me. So I picked up, I don't even remember which one I picked up next. I was working next to a record store at the time. So I'd just pop in on my lunch break and, you know, buy a CD for the car or something. And I eventually got Odds and Sods, Who Sell Out, Who's Next, and then Who by Numbers. And then somewhere after that, I just went nuts, and I've been an avid follower ever since.
Okay.
All right.
So my Who fandom started when I was in about 6th grade. I'm from upstate New York, from Albany. And both my brothers were big Who fans, and they indoctrinated me from a very early age. And I was listening. I think probably the most significant thing that catapulted me headlong into Who fandom was in junior high. Was my music teacher, Miss Filardi, and Miss Filardi held up an original vinyl release of Tommy, and she said, "You all should know this album really well. This is a really important album." And I said, "Hey, I know that. That's The Who. My brothers listen to that." I said, "Can I borrow that so I can make a cassette tape of it?" And I did, and I probably still have that TDK recording of Tommy somewhere. Tommy changed the way I understood music and pop and rock, and it still gives me a spiritual zap every single time I listen to it. I have a very spiritual connection with the band and with Tommy in particular, but with a lot of the material. So great to be here.
All right. Yeah, we are thankful you are here. So let's, I guess we'll just jump into the first one here. Who Sings My Generation? What you got, Tim? Give me some background. Give me something to go off of.
Well, I mean, 1965. So right off the bat, we're at the very forefront of what has become known as rock and roll. You know, Um, what the Beatles were on Revolver at this time, but mostly we're a singles-dominated market. So a lot of the songs that were being played on the radio, which would be singles, aren't going to be on the album, which is fun. But that's just the way the British rolled. And then, of course, there was a U.S. release that changed the track listing and order. I can't remember which song was which on which one, but there's one that flips.
I got it. I do have that information.
Perfect.
The U.S. got Insta Party, I think.
That's right.
Okay.
And the UK got I'm a Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. They didn't want to do I'm a Man in the States because they thought it was too sexually suggestive.
But wasn't it written by...
That's right.
Yeah.
It's Bo Diddley, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Bo Diddley song, yeah.
Yeah, well, big surprise. I mean, come on, honestly. You know, a black artist singing about adolescence, about coming of age. It was a little too suggestive, I think, for the censors, or at least for who was it? It was released in Decca in the States. So Decca was as we know, a fairly conservative label. They rejected the Beatles, you know. Obviously, by the time this material came around, they were more amenable to these types of groups, but still very careful, no doubt.
I think I like the UK. I mean, I think the I'm a Man's one of the best songs.
Oh, it's a great song
on the record.
Absolutely, and they revived it. They revived I'm a Man live during their farewell tour in the early 80s.
One of many.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting album, My Generation, or Who Sings My Generation, depending on which copy you're looking at. It was produced by Shel Talmy, who had produced the Kinks as well. And so you had a lot of idea and stylistic cross-pollination going on between the Who and the Kinks at the time.
Absolutely.
And I think what's probably most interesting about this is that because Shel Talmy was very proprietary about holding on to the rights to these recordings, they had a hell of a time in the later years, up until fairly recently, re-releasing these songs. They were second, third generation recordings until they got a hold of the original masters from Talmy, because they were in a dispute with him about it. They wanted to cancel their production contract because their new manager, Kit Lambert, had taken over their production duties, and Kit Lambert wanted to monopolize everything, and he wanted the rights to this original album. So what they did unofficially, what the band did, was they disowned the album, as it were, even though, you know, it has gone on to be probably one of the most classic, you know, albums in the genre, in rock, for many reasons, for many good reasons. Not just because of the title track.
Sure. Well, and The Kids Are All Right had a video clip at the time.
Right.
It's still a song that I hear people cover. Didn't they name a movie after it not too long ago?
Right. That's right.
One of the fun ones was A Legal Matter was the first time Pete sang a song, because Roger was actually going through a divorce at the time.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, he didn't want to sing it in case they used it against him in court.
That's great. You know, what's his name? Richard Thompson did a great cover of Legal Matter, and there's a live version out there floating. It's just great. If you're a Richard Thompson fan and you're a Who fan, it comes together very nicely there. What else is really interesting about My Generation is that you've got Nicky Hopkins playing piano on certain tracks.
Sure.
And Jimmy Page, right? Jimmy Page played lead guitar on Bald-Headed Woman, and it seems he
and
played
on I Can't Explain.
I Can't Explain.
Yeah, the first single. Yeah,
Right.
Which is, again, not on this album. Like,
Right.
Because it was just a single.
It was just a single.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the B side of La La Lies is The Good's Gone.
Both great songs.
Yeah, which was inspired by a Kinks song. It was inspired by which Kinks song was it? Oh, I forget. Damn. Oh, See My Friends. If you listen to the two songs back to back, you totally hear the influence. It was the Kinks song has influences of this Indian music that was finding its way, that the Beatles were influenced by, and it was finding its way into British pop, called raga, and it's tonally it has those sort of droning sounds to it. Very interesting song. Yeah,
I'll give the Who that. Like, we went through the Rolling Stones recently, and you have to get through quite a few records of, covers and a few originals. And it took the Rolling Stones a couple records to get to be the Rolling Stones.
And the Who are still kind of there. There's a couple covers here, and when you get into the super deluxe edition, there's some great ones. They're killing the songs.
But this is
they're bringing an energy to like Motown classics that you never knew were there. But yeah, you're right. Like, it's a strong debut album.
Yeah, I mean, the Ox alone is...
It's amazing. The messiness of the drums is just wonderful. It's just it sounds like he's literally in sort of this crafty, artful way tripping over himself.
Yeah.
Just unparalleled drum work in there. And of course, Entwistle too. They're all just having such a great time. And the much of the album is reported to have been recorded in a day. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of support. They went in and out of the studio real quick and banged it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much better debut, I think, than a lot of bands at the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they're a little later than some of the others, but I don't know. They didn't really have that growing period. They kind of jumped in it and started running.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to mention the Detours, and Roger, John, and Pete had been in a band together since probably like 61, 62.
Right. That's right.
So yeah, they had their chemistry down, and yeah, much like the Beatles, you get great 3-part harmonies with all three of them singing.
And John,
and then that just, what's that?
Didn't John bring in Keith? Isn't he the one that found Keith?
Keith kind of brought himself in. The story I've heard is that they were playing a show, and in between sets, this guy shows up holding a ginger beer, dressed in an entire ginger outfit, with his hair dyed ginger, and he says something like, your drummer's all right, but I'm better.
I can play better than him.
And so they're like, okay, come on up and show us what you got. And the story goes, he literally destroyed the drum set.
Right.
Jeez. Yeah.
And Townsend famously said, "This is the man for us."
And also famously, Mitch Mitchell of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, before that experience, had auditioned for The Who.
That's right.
Huh.
But they went with Keith.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Well, yeah.
And the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah.
Right?
And then, Entwistle is such an amazing bass player, and he only gets better, that that rhythm section is just a freight train every time.
And if you want good evidence of that, the Ox, that's the last track on side 2 of the UK release, is just a driving, it's when it's what I think Townsend refers to Entwistle's bass is sounding like a bloody VC-10, you know? It just has this incredible resonance to it, you know? And again, you got to credit Shel Talmy. He was a damn good producer. And he had good people working for him. So he knew how to capture the band. He knew how to capture what was more or less their live sound, right?
Yeah, but even then, you can hear live recordings, and even from this period, and they're so much better if you get an actual live recording.
The Railway Hotel recording, which was a film produced by their managers, Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, really also captures what they were all about. It's this, you know, it's this very cramped performance space with all of these mods high on amphetamines dancing to them, and you really get a sense of the mod scene, you know. And what the band was all about. You know, they look like kids, and it's just they're just so I don't know how to
you can't explain.
Well, you can't. I can't explain, right? But
another fun fact is that, of course, Pete was the mod, but Roger was a rocker.
Yes,
and so right. There were a number of in-band feuds as well. And at one point, Keith and John were taking so many amphetamines that they were playing too fast for Roger to sing.
Yes.
So he ended up punching Keith, and they kicked him out of the band for a week.
Yep.
Like the dysfunctional group of young, you know, hooligans going on here.
Very much so. Very much so. And Raj wasn't into the drugs. Raj was taking his role in the band very seriously, and he still does to this day.
Yeah. And he still sounds great to this day.
Yes, he does. He's always been about fitness and about readiness and about, you know, being the face of the band. He's always been very serious about that.
Which is kind of funny, because I wonder how seriously the other three took it at times.
Well, I think it's interesting. You know, I think they all saw themselves to some degree or another as the front men of the band, and what the beauty of the chemistry of it was that in some ways they were battling each other on stage, you know, both when they were literally fighting each other. Some of their performances ended in fist fights, but they also bounced off each other in a dynamic which resembled a fight, with the exception, of course, of John Entwistle. And one of the reviewers who wrote about it in the musical paper said they are basically the only thing that's anchoring them to the stage is John Entwistle. And he was always this stoic kind of guy, just kind of standing there, keeping the rhythm, very much in conversation with Mooney, right?
Sure, because you could argue there is no rhythm to this band. They're all playing lead all the time.
They're all playing lead, right. It's true. It's true. And Townsend is always moving back and forth between a rhythm and a lead role, you know? And he has more space to do that in the studio recordings, where he overdubs his own leads.
Sure.
Yeah. It's so nice to talk to people who care about the band. Who give a shit about this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's got to.
Yeah.
I suspect there are many out there.
This was a good listen. I liked it. I like the rawness of it. I like the early, you know, they're kids, like you were saying. They're just thrashing around, but yet they're doing something.
It's real primitive recording technology as well. So, yeah, at best, you're getting a stereo release.
Yes, yes. I think the original was mono, I believe. I
think they did both.
Yeah.
As was the I don't know, the flavor of the time.
Well, everything was made to be played AM. You know, even Townsend would say that, is that when in later years, when he mixed an album down, he would he would bring it into his car and play it driving on the highway, mono, trying to get the most AM sound out of it as possible so that he could get a sense of how it was going to sound to most fans.
Yeah, it's good technique.
Yeah, and the harmonies. I mean, and which is something which really developed later on as well, of course. But that was something that they did as tribute to Moon's passion, which was the beach sound. And he loved harmonies, and they tossed him a lot of bones when it came to that, and they really developed as a great harmonies band, a great male harmonies band. You know, even in their cover of, like, you know, later on of Martha Reeves and the Vandellas of Heat Wave, you really get the sense that they honed that beautifully.
Another story. I've been hearing my entire life how the Who did it first. The Who did it first. And then we start this channel, and we get Tim on here, and all I hear is the Who did it first. The Who did it first. And it goes back to, like,
well, I mean, let's go back to my generation. Not only can you name a song that had a bass solo in it before this?
That's right.
No.
Then My Generation.
You know, Green Day covered this on their first record, and I remember listening to it on my stereo, and my dad just busted in my room. That's a Who song. The Who did it first. I'm like, yeah, I know, Dad. The Who did it better, and just closed the door.
Well, yeah, arguably.
Same thing.
But yeah, and I was thinking too,
Nirvana, like smashing their instruments, you know, on Live Tonight Sold Out, and he just, well, the Who did that first. They're just trying to be like the Who.
Well, and Townsend took the tradition of auto-destruction from his artistic mentor, which is Gustav Metzger. And Gustav Metzger was a Polish Jew who moved with his family to Nuremberg in 1939. He was in 1928. Sorry, in 1939 he was moved out of Germany as part of the Kindertransport and ended up in England, and became a really important influence in the avant-garde art scene. And he coined the term auto-destruction, and Townsend studied under him, I think, at Ealing Art School. And the images, some of them that you see that they use on stage behind them were Metzger's, and Cream actually used some of Gustav Metzger's work too. So this idea of creative violence came out of that that post-war sensibility. As Townsend has put it in other interviews, he said, you know, our parents and our uncles were out there fighting for England, and I wanted to do that too, and so we did it by busting up our equipment on stage.
They did it well.
Yeah.
I was listening to My Generation again today, and can you name me a song before that had distorted bass?
Oh, for sure. Although, you know, what Lennon said about that, he said, with I Feel Fine, we used distortion before the Who, before any fucker. So go argue it.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying it's the first use of distortion, but I can't recall a distorted bass before this.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, and we'll get through it, and I can see where it's not talked about as much among Who fans as other albums, but I do think this album should be talked more in terms of 60s British rock.
Oh,
and it should be up there with Revolver and you know, Aftermath.
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. You know, look, I've always been peripherally in that conversation about, you know, the three-way competition between the Who, the Stones, and the Beatles, and who really carried the torch of the British invasion. And, you know, in some ways it's not an important discussion. It's one more of you know, drinking and just musing about these things.
And that's why we're here.
Nazdrovi.
Right.
So is it important? No. But what's more important, I think, is the fact is that you have personnel that find their way in all three bands, right? And
yeah,
we'll talk about that more in other albums too, with cover art and photographers and so forth. So these guys were all friends with each other. They all respected each other. You know, Townsend learned a lot from watching Mick Jagger on stage. He was gobsmacked by watching Jagger's presentation, the way he had his gravitas, his charisma on stage, and he likened Roger's charisma to Mick Jagger's, the way he basically just stood up there and took charge of the performance, right?
And legend has it that he stole the windmill move from Keith Richards.
Keith Richards, of course.
Yeah.
Despite what he tells the Smothers Brothers, that was bowling.
I don't know. Yeah, it's always been like a three-way, which is better, and I don't want to get into that argument, but I will say most of the music that the bands that I listen to nowadays were more influenced by The Who than they were the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Like, this is a highly influential band and record.
It is. It is.
Like, to this day.
For a lot of reasons. And yet, you know, I think one of the things that compromises the legacy of The Who very often is Townsend himself. He's constantly, you know, if you listen to his, even to this day, he's constantly comparing himself to these other artists, and he is leveraging his own fame based on how much they mention him, you know. Or he'll say, you know, he takes great pride in his demos, and we're not going to talk about those in terms of albums, but there's lots and lots of stuff, lots and lots of Townsend demos in official release out there. And, you know, one of the things he likes to say is that he influenced McCartney in home recording as a means to present a finished product to the band as to what the sound of the band was going to be. Which brings me also to this notion that The Who, as important as a band they are, or were, let's say, are a Pete Townsend project. I think that's a really critical truth. And you know, yes, you wouldn't have had the band without any of its component pieces. Each one is really, really important and central, and a critical part of that four-way magic, that symphonic sound that they produce. But Townsend as the creative center of the band, who, if you listen to the demos, he does all the instruments on them, and gives the band an idea of what this song is supposed to sound like. So if you juxtapose, let's say, the material from Scoop, is there anything on here which is on Scoop? I'm just looking. Let's see. Out in the street, I don't mind. Good's gone. Blah, blah, blah.
No, because really, the songwriting doesn't start till after this.
Right. No, but there's a very early version of what song am I thinking of? So Sad About Us, which is one of the songs
which is on the next album.
Right. Right. Where you really get a sense of just like how timid he was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also one of the most covered Who songs, actually, too.
All right. So let's go ahead and slot this in here. The way we do our rankings is we do it one by one. So we'll talk about a quick one, and then we'll rank it if it's better than the first one, so on and so forth, all the way down the line. So, anybody else have anything to add about My Generation?
No, I just want to listen to the album now.
Yeah,
Leaves
that's
me
Yeah,
wanting.
strong debut for a discography that's about to just explode.
Right, right.
yeah, this is like the beginning of what we're about to
Yeah,
get into.
You know, even the impishness of the photo, of the cover photo, you know, they're not smiling, and that's very much part of their image. Is this they're they're just sort of mugging for the camera of it's this attitude of what you see is what you get. We're rough guys. There's a certain amount of danger to us. We're a gang on stage, right? And you see that in their in the attitudes that they put forth in their facial expressions.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, that is the artwork is a. That's true. They all look kind of like don't mess with us.
It's don't mess with us. We are Britain, right? We are the face of young Britain. You're going to have to deal with us. This is the way we are, you know. And it's not nice and clean like the Beatles. It's not, it's not these perfect mop tops. So they're a little bit tousled. They're all wearing different outfits. You know, the Beatles were a put together, produced outfit aesthetically, very very intentionally by Epstein and by the label. Whereas these guys are, they all have their individual character.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just the name "My Generation" is like a slogan almost.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to your question, there's a lot more to say.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Like, subscribe. We're going to talk about a quick one next. So stick around for that. There'll be a link in the description below, or the playlist. It'll just play all these videos in a row so you can sit back with a drink. And that's about it. Be safe. Make good decisions.
Why don't you all fade away? Don't try to dig what we all